Okay, welcome back, kids up front, friends. This is our last session on cartooning and comics and sketching. And today we are going to talk a little bit about inking, and we're actually going to do an inking demo together. So there's a lot of different steps in making a comic. There's coming up with the idea, having a story you want to tell, writing out a script or plotting it, different ways you can do that. Then there's thumbnailing it. We didn't really talk about thumbnailing. We can talk about that at another time, but that's kind of the problem solving of making a comic when you're breaking it down into little thumbnail size sketches that are just really simple, just to kind of block and where you want your characters to be and how you want to lead the eye of the reader. There's so many cool things with that. That's probably the most one of the most rewarding parts of making comics, and for me, one of the most frustrating parts because it's a lot of trial and error and trying to figure it out. After that comes penciling. So we did some sketching and penciling, being really loose, figuring out where you want the lines to go and building up your characters. The next step is inking. And that's what we're going to do today. And then after that, of course, there's lettering, adding sound effects, coloring, post-production, all that. One cool thing with comics, that can be a job, those can all be done by different people, or they can all be done by the same person when you're making a comic. But we're going to talk about inking, and we're going to do some traditional inking today. So what you'll need if you want to draw along with me today is your brush pen that I believe you got. Should look something like this. This is a zebra brush pen. My one's almost run out of ink, so I'm going to use a slightly different one, but it's going to have the same effect. And then we're also going to need to draw along with one of the those penciled drawing PDF that I think was made available too. So that's what we're going to be inking over top of. So we're going to be using mostly brush pens. And what a brush pen is basically is a paintbrush that's a pen. It's a very well named art tool. So my favorite one is this. The one that I use the most is this one. It's called a Pentel pocket brush. And this, you take off the lid. It's got, if you can kind of see there, it's got kind of like a brush, right there, like a tip, like a brush, paintbrush tip. And that lets you do a lot of different kind of line variation. And then if you ever run out of ink, there's a little cartridge on the bottom here. You can get these refillable ones to fill it up with ink again, and you're good to go. These ones are pretty cool. You can get them from pretty much any art store. I think they're usually between like 10 to 20 bucks, $10 to $15, but they last a lifetime. This is the second one I've ever bought, and the only reason I don't have my first one is because I lost it. I don't know, it's somewhere in my house somewhere, but they last forever. The ones that you have are these zebra brush pens. This is a Tombow. It's very similar. It does the same kind of thing. It's got like a tip that looks a bit more like a normal pen, but it has the different pressure you put on it gives you different line widths. So you press a little harder, it goes a little thicker. You lighten up a little bit, it gets a little bit of a thinner line. These ones are great for learning on. When I first got this pen, I actually tried it. I got so frustrated and I didn't touch it again for about a year or two until I got a bit more comfortable with it. So these ones are great to start out with. I'm also going to use a little bit of a technical pen. This is called a micron. It's basically a really, really, really fine tip little pen for little details in that. So what we'll do, I'm at my art desk for today, so we'll flip the camera around. You can get your tools ready. Let's see here. Okay, hopefully we've got something. Oh, sorry about that. Okay, so hopefully there we can kind of see on the paper there. What we're going to do first is we're just going to test out the pen. So it's a good thing to have a scrap piece of paper around that you can kind of use to put your hand on so you're not smudging the ink, or just to have handy a little paper towel roll that you can dab off excess ink if it gets like that. So what we're going to do, we're going to take our brush pen and we are just going to practice. Just go really lightly, see what it feels like. You can do really light lines like that. And if you put a little bit of pressure down, you can get a thick line like that, right? So it's there's a lot of cool things you can do with that line variation. When I first started inking, when I wanted to build up a line, I would just kind of keep on going over and over. And that's definitely a way you can do it. But when you get used to pulling the line like this, it just kind of gives it a more natural flow, and it's a lot quicker too. Um, and there's all different kinds of techniques for shading too, right? Like we can shade in, we can do hatching, which are little lines going out. We can do cross hatching, which is crossing the lines like that. We'll talk a bit about that as we get drawing. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take our, now this is the pencil drawing, and you should be able to kind of see it, but not see it really well because we lightened it up a bit because we're going to ink over top of it. Now the difference when we're inking from when we're penciling, remember when we were sketching, I wanted you to be really loose, and just don't worry about doing a bunch of lines because we're going to figure out the drawings. Inking, we're going to take a bit more time and be a bit more thoughtful with where we place the lines, because this is the, not to put any pressure on it, this is the final line that's going down, right? So now that's not to say that we're going to trace it. When I first started inking, I used to kind of just trace over the lines, and it's not. Inking is art as well. It's you're contributing to the drawing, bringing it to life with your inking and the choices you make with that as well. So this little character here, this is Box Boy. He's the main character from my first graphic novel. I'm going to use my pocket brush pen, but you can use the other brush pen. And what we're going to do is we're going to start picking which lines we want to ink over, and just kind of going with it. You can start anywhere you want. See what feels the best for you for technique. I usually start from left to right as a general rule, just so, because I'm right-handed, so I don't want to like pull and smudge the ink. And I'm gonna put a little paper over top here too, just to kind of protect the rest of the paper so that the oil from my hand doesn't get on it too badly. And I'm kind of gonna pick, instead of just kind of going randomly like, oh, this tree in the background, I'm gonna start with the character because I just feel like I want to bring this character to life. And usually what you're inking first, you're gonna put a bit more energy in it, whether you realize it or not. So I'm gonna start over here on this little box flap. It's basically a box for a head. And I'm gonna start by just kind of going down and pulling the line down like that. And I'm going to come down here. Now, these lines I'm going to make a bit thicker than the lines that are kind of going inside. The ones that are more of the frame that the drawing's built up of, I'm going to make them a bit more of an outline because they're a bit more important for the structure, right? So I'm going to go make it thick like that. And then this little fold of like his little ear flap, I'm going to kind of almost like holding, now like I was drawing inking with the full brush, I'm going to be inking with just kind of the fine tip of the brush and kind of pulling back a little bit as I, oops, sorry about that, as I skid across here. I'm just going to kind of break it up a little bit like that and go down like this, come across like that, and just kind of keep on finding these lines. Now, one thing that is a choice you can make when you're inking is, you know how perspective works. When you look, you're looking down the road at the lampposts, and the one closest to you is really big, it looks really big, and the further away they go, the smaller they get, right? So I'm going to make these lines that are in the front thicker than the ones that are in like his ear flap on the other side here. And that's just going to kind of give a little bit of a feel of of uh, of distance, of depth, of perspective within the drawing itself. And there's different styles for drawing. You can flip it around, go around. You'll find when you're pulling the line, this for example again here, if I pull it down, it's harder. It's like it gets thicker, but it's harder to like kind of pull it up and keep that flow. Like if I wanted to do a box like going right to left, it's kind of pushing against the tip of the brush and kind of makes it a little bit dirty of a line, right? So I'm going to, if I want to go to right to left, maybe I'm going to turn it around and go like that. That's something. Another technique here is dry brushing, which is kind of going on like that using a lot of ink and then getting kind of the dry. You see how it kind of gets kind of a dry brush kind of feel. That's another technique. Anyway, but well, and sometimes the tip of your brush will get a little bit, it'll lose the tip. So when that happens, just kind of give it a little back and forth to the side just to get a good brush tip back again. Okay, so let's keep going on this over here. So we've got this over here. This is the arrow for his design. He's basically made out of a cardboard box, and he's upside down as well. When I was making this graphic novel, I drew this character hundreds, maybe 1,000 times, so I got really good at writing upside down for the thing there. And then here's this little line. Here he's got his eyes are kind of just like cut out of the box, cutouts, just like that. Now, these little X's here, if you're working with a penciler and you're not penciling yourself, you might see the penciler will put little X's on the drawing. And what that usually means is that they want it filled in with black, spotted with black ink. And so instead of just sketching out the whole black thing, they just put a little X there. So I'm going to color this in just like so. Feel free to use like a bigger marker or a paintbrush or something like that instead of the brush pen you have, the zebra pen. Okay, so we got kind of like that little detail here. Now, usually what I'll do is I'll ink with the brush first, and then I'll go in with the technical pen after. But just to kind of show you how to add some little extra details, I'm going to take this Micron here, that really fine tip pen, and I'm going to kind of go in here and do the little flaps or the corrugated cardboard kind of edge here. And what's fun about this is you can start adding little details, like little imperfections in the boxes, little dots, kind of adding a little bit of texture to it like that. Okay, so let's keep going with this one just for a little bit, and then I want to show you a couple other techniques and things we can do. So here I'm coming over with his scarf, and again, the scarf isn't the main detail. I want the reader to really be focusing on his face and where he's looking. So I'm going to do just a little lighter lines when I'm inking the scarf over here. And similar for the hand. This is his little hand. So I did thicker here, thinner there. So much of inking is just personal preference and a choice. Again, there are all the different rules for like perspective and leading the eye and coloring and things we talked about with shapes and things, little rules that will kind of always work if you want them to. But the wonderful thing about making art and making comics is you don't have to follow the rules. You can break them and do it in some really fun ways and make some really cool stylistic choices and things like that. But it's a good idea to know the rules before you break them, just to kind of get a indication. Okay, so these are his little paper towel legs. And if you want to add a little bit of depth, there's going to be a shadow that's underneath of, because this cereal box, it protrudes further than where the legs are. So we can add a little shadow by doing some of that hatching. So I'm going to do like a little line here, like that. And I'm just going to do some little lines up from that line, like that. Just like that. And so it's kind of hinting at like, oh, there's a bit of a shadow under here. You can do the same thing for underneath his cross hatching there, under his head. And over here, we've got the grass. Now, grass and hair are very similar when you're inking, in the sense that you don't need to draw every single line. Remember, we talked about how when you're picking what moments to have in your panel, in your comic, you pick the moments and you let the reader close the gap. in between them, right? So the Hilda comic, we saw the ogre, we saw Hilda looking at the ogre, we saw a big fist in the air and then the fist on the ground, and in the next panel, and we close the gap and say, oh, the ogre saw her and smashed its fist down trying to crush her, and she got away, right? So same thing with when we're doing grass. I don't have to draw every single blade of grass. I'm just going to kind of do a couple here like this, just kind of like that, and maybe I'm going to put some little shadows in, or a little bit of ink down there to kind of show a shadow. And then here's just a little broken line, couple more little blades sticking up here, and it kind of shows like there's the grass. Instead of drawing the whole thing, it is a little bit cleaner, a little bit nicer to look at. So over here we've got the bush, the trees. What I'm going to do for now though is I'm going to move over to this one, and just to show you a little different technique. Okay, so here we've got like just an old man. This is actually a rough initial design I worked on for a character in the graphic novel I'm working on right now. Old Joe. He's a little more sinister in here than he is in the comic. He's a bit of a nice guy in the comic, but here he looks a little sinister. So we're just going to kind of come in here. I like starting with the eyes a lot, because they're just really expressive. And then see how we push down. So push down, let up, push down, and kind of fill in that space like that. And then just some little lines over here. So to show that he's old Joe, give him his nose over here. I'm gonna put a little shadow under his nose like this. Just going a little bit of extra ink underneath there like that. Just little light lines here to show kind of like the wrinkles under his eyes. Can really add a lot. Here's his eyebrow. Just kind of following the line with it. And let's get his head here. Thick line on top. Over here, oh, let's do his ears. So that line variation again really helps kind of add a bit more, just a little more energy to the drawing. I don't know if you've noticed when you're drawing. With me, I find like my initial sketches are like usually really, there's a lot of energy, a lot of life in them. And then as I refine them and make them more of a finished drawing, a lot of time it loses a lot of that energy of the initial drawing. And I think a big part of that is just the more you draw it, and the more it loses a lot of the motion in it. So line variation, width variation really helps with that. So for his mustache here, like I said earlier when we're doing the grass, also with hair, a great way to ink and draw hair is not drawing like not having to draw every single, like, oh, here's his mustache, I'm drawing every single hair. You can for sure, but another way you can do it is just kind of using the broad outside lines and then just kind of couple, just kind of pulling it up like that. And it's not even all, I'm not even closing the line on a lot of them. It's just kind of hinting at that. Now here's a little thing you can do when you're inking as well, is a little shadow underneath of the neck, because our chins stick out, right? So I usually just I like to just fill in a little bit of like a shadow underneath there, just kind of going black, and kind of feathering it out with some more hatching, and just adds a little extra bit of depth. And remember, we also talked about those areas of lightness and darkness to create interest. So I can do the same thing here with his shirt. I'm going to make his shirt here black, and his outer shirt is like a flannel kind of thing with some lines like that. But those areas of dark and light, lots of detail and then not much detail, it creates an interesting kind of balance when you're drawing. And here, let's give him a couple little hairs sticking out on his head. Let's give him a couple little liver spots like that. There we go. Now, another cool technique, I think we've only got a minute or so left. I'll go really quickly here, show you a couple things, is something called an ink wash. So remember we talked about a brush pen? This is another kind of brush pen. It's called an aqua brush. You can get them at any art store, usually Michael's, Colors, Paint Spot, places like that. And it's basically a brush you fill with water. I won't unscrew it here because it's filled right now. I filled it with water and a couple drops of ink, and just a couple. And what that does is it creates kind of like a watered down ink, like called a wash, like this. And so you can go in behind it, your drawing, and you can add like a little background like this wash over here like this, and just kind of make some like interesting, like how to frame it. You can even like shade with this or add shadows. Like I can add some shadows underneath his eyes over here with this wash on his nose, just like that. And it just kind of adds a little bit of extra kind of interesting kind of thing to it. One last thing I'd like to show you, this little sketch of Batman here. We're going to go ahead and ink it, but we're going to leave some lighting. We're going to do some lighting. So you know how if you have like an object and say there's a light over here and it's shining on it, this part where the light is hitting, it's going to be lighter than the rest. There's going to be a little highlight over there, right? And the shadow is going to be back here. So with Batman, again, I'm going to start with the eyes. I'm just going to do this one quickly, just like that. Here's his cowl. What I'm going to do, and what you can do if you'd like, let's see here. That's just a quick one. Oh, he's got his chin. Here's his mouth. Okay. Okay. Is leave a little highlight over here. So you say there's light coming in over here on his face. So I'm going to kind of highlight like this area like this. And I'm not going to ink in this area here. I'm just going to ink in the rest of it. And it's going to create kind of like a little highlight that will kind of help make the drawing pop a bit more, especially with Batman, where a character like Batman, where his costume is basically a shadow, right? It's a lot of dark, a lot of ink used on Batman like that. So you can lose a lot of the form when inking him, right? So I'm inking him in here, just like that. And then that little bit of highlight that we left kind of adds a little more depth and interest to it. If we want, we can get him some stubble by doing some little lines going out here. This Batman has been looking for justice all night long and didn't get any sleep, and he wasn't able to shave. Just like that. Okay. And then we can combine that other thing. We can use that ink wash again, kind of come underneath here and do like a little shadow underneath there. And one other last thing I'll show you is this pen. This is called a jelly roll. It's a great name for a pen. And basically it's like whiteout in a pen form. And there's some different ones you can get. You can get like a sort almost like a brush pen version of it, but this is white ink, and you can come in here, instead of leaving the ink for a highlight, you can actually just kind of add your own highlights. If it works, just like that, right? Like maybe there's some light hitting over here or over here, and then it just kind of adds another kind of tool for your inking that you can ink along with, right? So those are some fun tools. I love inking. It is one of my favorite things to do when doing comics and making drawings, and it can be a lot of fun. It can be really frustrating at the same time, especially when you're starting out. But if you stick at it, it can be just so much fun. I love inking. But anyway, those are a few little tips and demo of how to start getting into inking if you're into that. I hope you've had a great time drawing along with me. I love cartooning, and love hearing about other people getting excited about drawing and creating things. So thank you so much. Have a great rest of the day and winter, or whenever you're watching this, and we'll see you another time. Thanks, everyone.